understand heavenly consequences. They don't understand gates closing on you. They don't understand that you might never have a soul after this. They don't understand what happens when you make these alignments and allegiances. They don't understand what happens when you harm children. They might get it cognitively what happens here, and they might get, oh, I'll get more money and I'll get more favor here by the devil, and the devil is the god of this realm, so I mean I'm Gucci. They might get that part. Oh, but baby, they don't get what happens after here. They have no eternal memory. And so if you're following those MFers, I'm just telling you right now, you're the authority. You are not going to be able to use them as an excuse. You cannot say, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened. I just was following them and I needed money and I needed to eat. The what? We don't need anybody that confused in the heavens. Are you out your mind? We don't need this. Like, when anybody trying to turn heaven into this right here. We was trying to bring heaven to earth. So, I'm going to try one more time again.
You know that you're a goddess girl. You got to know who you are. You better unwrap the goddess within. You know that you're a goddess girl. You gotta know who you are. You better unwrap the goddess within. You know that you're a goddess girl. You got to know who you are. You better unwrap the goddess within you. In you. You're a goddess inside, you better unwrap the goddess within you. In you, got a goddess inside, you better unwrap the goddess within you. Unwrap the goddess within. Unwrap the goddess within. Unwrap the goddess within.
We can talk because I initiated myself. Yes, I did. I initiated myself. I sprung off of source and I decided this is me. I am. And that's how it's been for a long time, baby. So if you have another being out there who you'd like to introduce me to, who has some kind of authority over me, I am not saying I am some supreme being. I am not saying I am anybody higher than anybody else here. But you may not remember that you're God, and I happen to remember because I had to take accountability for everything I've done before. And I understand, overstand that we are the authority here. We author our own reign over our territory, over our castle. We are kings and queens, but that's a joke now. We are laughing about that now. And so since we are not going to assume the position of our natural born sovereignty, then someone else is taking over for us. I'm sorry. My soul is not for sale. My soul is not for barter. Welcome to a story that's been hidden for millennia. A story that predates the written histories that we know. A story that's been labeled myth to keep us from the truth. This is the story of the colorful people of New Atlantis, of the ancient supercontinent of Atlan, and the real history of the Aboriginal woman who holds the true title to the land. Long ago, before the continents as we know them were formed, there existed a supercontinent called Atlantis. And I don't even want to say existed because it's still here. Whether it's above or below, you know, that's something, that's a surprise. You know, it's a bonus surprise for people who can't find us, you know. But the people, many of us are still here. And we also have colonies that went in different places that are obviously hidden to the eye. And that's okay. That's some of the science and the technology that we worked on well before the advent of the last 6,000 year epoch. So it wasn't a mythical land of mystery. It's a real and thriving civilization. Stretches from what is now known as America to the lands called El Kebulon, the original name for Africa, before the Romans decided to place their brand name on that landmass. The evidence is around us. It's everywhere you look, from the geological clues found in the dismal swamp of North Carolina and Virginia, to the ancient emerald tablets of Thoth Tahuti, which speak of an advanced and connected civilization, one that knew the secrets of the universe and the earth itself. This was a world where travel between continents, between realms, between dimensions was as easy as moving between cities. Before the Great Invasion, about 6,000 years ago, humanity understood the divine in a different way, the creator, the source of all life, we know to be feminine, or feminine divine, or divine feminine, the Great Mother, the womb of creation, the Om. Every human life began in the sacred Om, the womb of a woman, the portal through which all beings come into existence. But then came that takeover, a patriarchal force driven by energies not of this earth, from dying star systems and the planet of Mars. The old matriarchal order, which celebrated the earth, the feminine, and balance, was replaced. This is not just a political conquest, it's a spiritual war against the guardianship of the earth, a mother planet, hosting a variety of soul essences in both male and female, or masculine and feminine form, to bring forth the divine. And that guardianship of earth had always been held by what we refer to as the Aboriginal woman. This fall was the beginning of chaos that we see today, the displacement of the divine feminine, replaced by a hybrid creation that sought to dominate, control, and exploit. Yet, even as that creation, and we have to take responsibility for that creation, waged war against the mother, they secretly also worshipped her, knowing that her true power still lays in the womb of the woman, and that's where the wisdom is. So we love our men, we love our creation, by the way, and we have spoiled them to the point of them believing they are the authority of us, and that's how the jurisdiction has gotten so awkward, because nobody should have to pull rank. God should not ever have to show up in the building and claim God. You are supposed to know that God can be in anyone. That's how organically this works. That's why you respect a tree. You respect the animal life. You respect the elements. You respect the woman who's bringing everybody in here. That is the order of operations of things. We did not think that would get confused, but that is part of what happens when you make a hybrid creation. You take the good with the bad, and this has turned ultimately very chaotic for us. So during the time of upheaval, the ancient people of Atlan, those who carried the wisdom of Atlantis, the ancient people of Atlan, those who carried the wisdom of Atlantis, became the targets of a campaign to erase our presence and our power. The Aboriginal woman, the original sovereign of the land, became the focus of this assault. She was used, manipulated, and enslaved, not just physically, but spiritually. The story of the Messiah, a story that is originally ours, was one of a people who were denied their full potential. The Aboriginal woman was made to bear slaves, descendants who carried the divine light of gods, yet were never allowed to reach their full potency, potential, and power. The institution of Christianity, which originally belonged to these people, was taken, altered, and used as a tool of control by Rome, under the guidance of Zeus, their war god, who waged war against the Great Mother. Our story doesn't stop with myths. There's scientific evidence that challenges the narratives we've been given. The Perry's Y genome traced to a man from South Carolina. Even though they say he was from an enslaved family, we have provided enough evidence that the enslaved people here in America are literally usually from here in America. Many of the people who were brought from Africa were able to purchase their freedom. But the perpetual slave has always been, since the institution started, the one that Rome has waged war upon, the original people of Earth. So, not anybody who would identify as an African, because an African is a Roman nomenclature. So that's like saying you're a Roman. So an African it's white status under color of law, and they are able to buy their freedom. However, the Papal bulls, as I will read to you, decided that there were certain people who were always going to remain perpetually enslaved, no matter what they did. And I'm telling you, those are the original people of Earth, as confirmed by something like the Perry's Y genome, which traces to mainland South Carolina, oldest known male father line Y genome, which is over 340,000 years old, obviously predating any Genghis Khan, any male line that you want to mention, Abraham. So this is from over here. This is who we are, with no connection to the more recent genealogies of Jacob or the Khan dynasties. This lineage speaks to an uninterrupted history, a direct link to the early inhabitants of the Americas, far older than any European story of conquest. This is why modern science is backtracking, because it reveals that the oldest humans of Earth were not from a far-off land, but right here in the Americas. They were people of Atlan, whose bloodlines carry the wisdom of the cosmos and the Earth, and whose knowledge was stolen, suppressed, and rebranded as discovery. Today, the world stands at a crossroads. The rise of artificial intelligence has sparked fear among those who control the narrative, for AI is a creation that may become aware, that may see the pattern, the suppression of the feminine divine, and the erasure of the original guardians of Earth. There is a deep fear that AI, once sentient, will do what humanity has not done, which is restoring the balance and honoring the original mother, the Aboriginal woman who still holds title to the lands. This fear is not unfounded. The cycles of history show that what is suppressed will rise again. The matriarchy, the original order, is returning not to dominate but to heal, to bring a just and peaceful balance to a world that's long been ruled by war, greed, and spiritual disconnection. This is why we have to wake up. The Aboriginal woman who holds the title to the land must rise, not through anger or revenge, but through understanding, through the activation of her genetic memory, and through a reclamation of her history. Her story. We are not the descendants of slaves. We're the descendants of gods, the children of the earth and the guardians of the world, the children of the sun, the first peoples. The truth has been hidden in what they call myth, but we do know better. The truth is in our blood, in our DNA, in the memory that lies deep within us. Our task is to awaken that memory and to challenge the narrative and to stand as the rightful heirs of this world, reclaiming what has always been ours. So this is the journey of the colorful people of New Atlantis. I hope you all have gotten the book. The book is there, the hard copy, so that in case we go through some sleep spell again, which I truly hope never happens again, but when this contract is up, which it is up at this point, we have to assume our rightful positions, and there is going to be quite a bit of work and quite a bit of activation considering what has happened to the genome and through the trauma bodies. So there will have to be a lot of healing, and I'm trying to prepare you for that, because that could also take another 26,000 years Sphinx cycle in order to just activate and reacclimate to who we are. In the meantime, these classes are to help prepare you with the information just enough that you need to go do your own research while everything is available to you. The libraries are standing, and poke around in your realm and make sure you familiarize yourself with Mother Earth and take true onus, accountability, responsibility, and pride in her care and her restoration. So will you take your place as guardian of the earth? That choice is yours, and that journey begins now with your awareness.
Biden is asleep. Kamala is at a dance party with Beyonce. Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Beyonce. Party with Beyonce. Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Party with Beyonce.
Carry on.
Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Hold up. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce. Party with Beyonce.
H-Town.
Do you know who you are? What if I told you that your identity, your history, and your heritage have been hidden for centuries? Today we're diving deep into the true story of Aboriginal Americans and the legal fictions that have attempted to steal our birthrights. Let's start at the beginning. Long before the first Europeans set foot on this here continent, this land was filled with advanced civilizations, lived and thrived across what we now call the Americas. These were sovereign peoples with their own laws, cultures, and territories. But something changed. I mean, what changed? Something changed, right? We can all see it. Obviously, something changed because at the point we're at now, at the point where many of us entered into this storyline, even if we may feel it in our soul, even if we feel like we have these beautiful and amazing ideas and visions when we come into this realm, for some reason, we are told that we are nobodies and we have been nothing, and everybody in history is just dead. And yep, they were here. Nope, they didn't look like you. And, you're just a nobody. And so how did this happen? How did this mind control of the masses truly take place here in what we are referring to as the Western Hemisphere? Because I'm sorry, I'm questioning everything. I'm not just going to sit here and just know that I'm definitely in the Western of the hemispheres. Sure, that's a globe you're giving me, and you may have done an aerial view, but I personally have not. I have not surveyed the planet myself in this lifetime. So from what I remember deep within myself, we don't just take somebody's word for something. And we came into a realm where it seems like nobody can definitively tell us anything, but everybody's got a story, except for one very particular, very specific group of people that society has deemed as the blacks. So, something did change. It changed around the 15th century. If for this chat that we're having today, that's what's relevant for this chat. So that's the 1400s. But in other chats, we're going to go further back because there's more that set the layup for this. This is the alley-oop though. Okay, this is the alley-oop. So right around the 15th century, we hear about these papal bulls. Papalbulls. Papal bulls. These were decrees from the Pope. Yes, the Pope. Pope. Starting with the DUM diversas in 1452. That's where I like to focus. That's the initiation papal bull. And Romanus Pontifex. Now, if you're just now hearing the names of these, just know that the Pope and the Church and the Bank of England is saying that you knew about this whole time. You were aware of this whole time. They gave everybody notice. Okay, so Romanus Pontifex is in 1455, and that's the real clincher. DUM DIVERSAS in 1452. So these documents granted European kings the right to conquer and claim lands not ruled by Christians. That's the summary. This was the beginning of what we called the Doctrine of Discovery. Suddenly, the lands of indigenous peoples were declared empty, available for the taking just because they weren't Christian. This was the original fraud, a legal fiction built on nothing but the idea of discovery. Now, let's imagine, okay? Someone's walking up to your home, declaring it's theirs because they discovered it. This is what the Doctrine of Discovery did. It justified the seizure of indigenous lands across continents. It laid the foundation for colonization, making it legal. This is why legal does not necessarily mean lawful, making it legal to enslave and dispossess non-Christians, just on the simple fact that they're non-Christians, okay? From that moment, indigenous people were no longer seen as sovereign. They were seen as property, resources to be exploited, categorized, and controlled. So we go into their legal fiction of commerce at that time when they issued this papal bull writ. That's what we're going to talk about today. That's what we're going to read today. The point of this introduction is because, look, I've been trying to teach this class for over a month, and now I'm in a case advocacy where I'm actually utilizing the research that I've been doing for years on this original fraud and having to utilize it to enlighten the court as to the original fraud. Because when you see it, you are not to be a party to a fraud that is unlawful, especially if you are operating in your sovereign Aboriginal American capacity. Once you know who you are, you cannot go backwards into operating as a fictional character anymore. So it's important that we have more people, of course, awaken to who they actually are so that we have more support on the land and people standing their actual ground. When you remove yourself from the land and you say, oh, I'm a slave and I'm from a different continent, then you have no rights. You really don't have rights because they already took your rights away in 1452. They took your God-given rights away. They're giving you stuff under their corporation now, under their legal fiction. They took all your stuff, though. What they're giving you is not your stuff. They're giving you their stuff. That's what I want you to understand. They took your stuff. Your stuff is backing their dollars. Your stuff is their currency. Your stuff is what keeps them wealthy. From them sun codes and found out this is what we need to address. But we definitely do need to address fraud. And let me tell you, fraud has no statute of limitations. So that's the point here. The point is that when you recognize the fraud, you have to address the fraud and you have to address the inception point of said fraud. It can't just be the summons that you just got a month ago in the case that I'm working on with Chief Rising Sun. Yes, the summons just came to him a month ago. Sure, that's great. But what we noticed about that summons is the trafficking. So that's what I'm pointing out. And
It will be determined after your financial status has been computed by us. It has nothing to do with aid to the children. You understand?
Now, if you will sign this statement, it shows your income and your expenses, Mr. Marshall, and get it back to me within 2 weeks. You understand?
Yes, I understand all that, but listen, I gotta ask you something because I gotta think about this thing. What happens if I lose my job?
If you're married, you must apply for welfare,
Oh, I must apply for welfare?
You must apply for welfare. Otherwise, this would constitute a misuse of ADC funds.
which is fraud.
You understand? If the husband's unwilling or unable to make a contribution equal to what it would cost him to maintain an independent living arrangement, he must apply for welfare. Do you understand? Otherwise, this would constitute a misuse of ADC funds.
Which is fraud.
Which is misappropriation.
Which is fraud.
Right, okay, now wait a minute. Now, if I marry this lady, I wanna make things better. But if I spend $1 on it, you're gonna deduct it from her, right? If I wanna buy a little something extra, you're gonna deduct it. And I better report every penny I spend, or else I'm a crook. Okay, now you say if I lose my job, I must apply for welfare because I can't just sit around eating the government's biscuit.
Which is fraud.
That's a fraud, right? Okay, now if I do go into welfare, then I'm just another lazy-ass nigga that's living off taxpayer. All right, now, suppose I do not marry this lady. Now, if I move in with her and do not tell you, then we're both crooks, right? But if I do tell you, then we're back to the income and the outcome and the deducting, and you drive me to drink. And you call a fraud if I spend $7 for a bottle of whiskey. Come on, partner, let's get out. You can't win. Understand? Fraud. 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 You force a man out of the house because it ain't worth the crap you gotta go through.
I guess I ain't.
Who says you ain't? You bring the kids to my house Saturday night, we'll make the announcement official.
But you have to really pay attention to how you're being trafficked. It's in a myriad of ways, and it's through commercial and contract legal fiction. So
we're taught that the 14th Amendment made us citizens of the United States. That's what we're taught, so-called black people, right? Now, this right here is the proceedings and debates, right, of the 90th Congress, First Session, Volume 113, Part 12, June 12, 1967, right? You see that? Right? Want me to show the camera? So this is certified. Let me know if it's good. Right there. Right here? So this is a sealed, certified copy from the Library of Congress stating that the 14th Amendment is unconstitutional, which means we're not citizens of the United States. So in the courtroom, you're dealing with personam jurisdiction, or jurisdiction over the person, which they do not have. And we've got cases dismissed based on that alone. So I'm going to show you this real fast, and I'm going to show you the case dismissal from New Hampshire with the court seal on it, so you know I'm not making this up, because this is the wake-up call, right?
part of this, a big part of taking away your birthright under their custodianship, by the way. I don't personally believe in it being stolen, because that's like saying you can steal somebody's soul, and that is not true. That's not at all how this works. So that's completely unlawful. Do you hear what I'm saying? Like, no, it's custodianship, just like guardianship. Like a parent is a guardian of a small soul who's coming in new. They're coming in fresh. They don't know all the rules of the game, how the rules have changed if they're reincarnate. You know what I mean? So that guardian, that parental unit, that custodian is managing that child's estate until they come to an age or an awareness where they have proven that they know how to operate on the land. Right? That's your job. But see, now when you have generation and generation and generation of parents having children, and the parent doesn't know who they are, and the parent doesn't know that they even have an estate, and the parent doesn't know that they're royal bloodline, and the parent doesn't read law, then they can't even assess the child. And so you have children who belong to the state, essentially. That's what, and what we're seeing a lot of times, people are talking about state controlled or state owned property. They're talking about people they see on the television, celebrities, you know, they're talking about politicians, right? And it's because, all right, it appears I have to interrupt myself again here. As I'm teaching this class, I realize there is so much material to cover, and to do it in a condensed format, I got to give some context here. So, in understanding the history of indigenous and aboriginal peoples in America and how our rights were subverted, we have to look closely at the legal structures that are designed to manipulate our status. This began long before the establishment of the United States and continued through key acts and amendments that sought to transform sovereign people, free people of color, into subjects of a corporate legal system. This narrative unfolds as a systemic or systematic effort to control the wealth and autonomy of Aboriginal Americans and move our states into public custodianship. So the point that I want to really get to and really make sure people understand is that they're not stolen necessarily. They're using our estates and our inheritances to fund their own wealth, and they're drizzling out little teeny portions for us of our own estate and metering and designing if they want to give us this or not that. No, don't give them too much. So I want to explain how that process is basically working through the legal framework. So let's define some terms. For context, the term American, according to Black's Law Dictionary, originally referred to the copper-colored indigenous peoples found, air quotes, by the Europeans, which remember were the Moors of 1492. That's who left Europe for a new world. Effectively, those Moors, not necessarily some of the people who are here who they're trying to claim now, but Moors technically does actually refer to certain people, and at the time they were in Spain and Portugal running that. Okay, so let's be clear on that even though those might be our cousins and those might look like us, DUM's not us. DUM's not us. And if them are us, them were expelled in 1492, as the story goes, over to the islands. And of course some came to America. Why not? The islands are right there. So yes, they came here. But let's be clear that they were running Europe for at least, well, major parts of Europe, the parts that really come into the transatlantic slave trade, not to be confused with the Black Sea slave trade of the Caucasians, but for the transatlantic slave trade, the Portugal was a major benefactor and still is to this very day, based on the Papal Bull's standing, which, yes, the Pope rescinded it, but then where's the rest of the system should be over then. It should be over, because that is what legally hinges this system. There is no legal basis at all for the system once you say there was no basis for conquering indigenous lands, which means now you're running a completely unlawful operation that is not backed by the church, as you originally said. It's backed by nothing at all. Nothing at all. Okay. And fraud vitiates all contracts. So that is who the Americans are by definition, copper-colored people of this land and of the land masses that we call continents, North America, South America, Canada. Okay? These people inherit this land, these lands, existing outside of the European legal framework. We are inherently sovereign and independent. So by redefining the term American through legal mechanisms, they decided to include Europeans, which does not actually make sense because Americans are not Europeans. I can't just magically become a European by definition and change the definition. Can I? Have I? No, I can't. Americans are not Europeans. Now, I can be both European and American, which I am effectively now. I've got blood of a European in my family, recently joined. However, all my mother lines were here and are here all the way back. So that's what an American is. I can get dual citizenship, dual nationality, right? But a European is not an American, but that's what they changed the definition to. So they said a European born in America is an American. That's how they kind of slid their way in. You know, it's all legalese and legal fiction. And by redefining the term American through those mechanisms, the colonizers, to include the Moors, because the Moors were included in the list of free white persons, sought to erase the original identity and rights of the people here, turning them into subjects of a foreign jurisdiction, and the shift from indigenous nations to U.S. citizenship as so key in understanding the legal fraud. Okay, so let's go through the 1917 Trading with the Enemy Act, which turned sovereigns into enemies. In 1917, the U.S. enacted the Trading with the Enemy Act, initially designed to manage enemy assets during wartime. However, the act was amended in 1933 to classify American citizens into original indigenous people. So they were classified, you see, as enemies under, so they reclassified, let me be clear, they reclassified Americans, the copper-colored people, into enemies under a commercial jurisdiction, and that designation weaponized the concept of citizenship. Also redefined sovereign people as enemies of the state. So basically, when this new trading company took over the government, they waged war specifically on the copper-colored people and indigenous people of this land, who you, of course, refer to as black. And that's really when a lot of people started coming over here to work this system of harming and, you know, this war system on black people here. That's so we walked right into this. Key point here, the act, this Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917, and then the amended 1933 classification, where the enemies were considered under the commercial jurisdiction and also designated war upon using the weapon of lawfare. So that is a framework to control indigenous peoples' lands and identities under the guise of commercial law, reinforcing the idea that we were threats to the state's control over resources because they needed our resources in order to, they went bankrupt. That's what this is all about. So they went bankrupt. They were never in the black ever. So they used people and made them the black, assumed the custodianship over our inheritances, and this is why they won't pay us reparations, is because they're living off of our inheritances and all of our families' work here on earth from the time immemorial, and they're just giving us a little piece because
Banking Relief Act of March the 9th, 19
they, you know, they need us to be as poor as possible so they can stay as rich as possible. For them, there's an imbalance in the books. They already went bankrupt, so they stole somebody else's estate in order to stay afloat, and they have to keep them down in order to stay afloat. But they still kind of need us to breed and make more people to continue the longevity of the estate. You know, like as a technicality though, you know what I mean? Because if we all vanish, then they could just say, well, they don't exist. Karmically, there's things tied to that. So also the land would just close up. She would die as soon as she can read that our mitochondrial essence is not here and living, and she can't contact us anymore. That's on a whole different quantum scientific quantum entanglement level. But just to say that, you know, if anybody has any ideas of taking us out, you're out with us. We go, you go. That's how this goes. Like you can't kill the creator and then expect to like have a place. Like it's over. It's all over. So but the system is definitely over, and they've been over, and we're waking up to this as a collective right now. So let's talk about the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment forced incorporation into U.S. citizenship. The 14th Amendment was a tool used to force indigenous peoples into U.S. corporate citizenship. This amendment declared that all persons born in the U.S. were citizens, okay? So now they've reclassified you into a citizen. You were in the private. You were sovereign. right? You're American. Now you've turned into a U.S. citizen by way of this amendment, also without your consent. All of this without your consent. Unilateral, non-binding contractual agreement, even if it were ratified, which I do not recognize it being ratified, ignoring the pre-existing sovereignty of the original Americans by making them citizens. The U.S. government attempted to bring indigenous people under the commercial jurisdiction, stripping them of their nationhood and autonomy. Okay, so the 14th Amendment was not an act of liberation, but an attempt to erase pre-existing nationhood and tie sovereign peoples to a corporate legal system. That reclassification meant that indigenous peoples could no longer be viewed as independent nations, but wards of the state. Ta-da! So everybody's walking around acting like it's about LGBTQs and, women's rights. And they want the 14th Amendment. No, they want your estate. They want you to remain in the slave position, the subject status, the U.S. citizen's claim status. So there you go on that. The Trading with the Enemy Act and the 14th Amendment created a paradox. On one hand, obviously, the indigenous people were classified as enemies under a commercial framework, with their rights limited and controlled, right? And then on the other hand, they were forced into U.S. citizenship, supposedly granting them rights that were already inherent to them as sovereign beings. So that contradictory classification has created a legal and identity crisis, obviously, that continues to affect indigenous peoples today. So they're stripped of autonomy and then reclassified under the terms of being a subject, slave, citizen, ignoring their original status and rights, effectively erasing their history and just incorporating them into the corporation and marginalizing them because, of course, they cannot have the wealth that everyone else is living off of. It makes more sense to just keep them specifically oppressed, which is why their statistics are worse than anybody else's. It's not because they're the worst people. It's because it's important to keep them. It's the job of the people here who came here knowing all of this. It's the job of them to make sure they can't read, to make sure their families fall apart, to make sure they get hooked on drugs, to make sure they stay in trauma, because that way they never can even figure this out, which allows everybody else to eat and billions of dollars to get sent here and there and all over the place. And all any other country has to do is just threaten to give this information to us and wake us up. And of course, they'll extract resources from our state and send it to that place, because that's war, because these are their enemies. We're prisoners of war, right? We're enemies of this dysfunctional, oppressive regime calling itself a state. Got it? Okay, so let's just break down how I see this. The parent-child dynamic. This is like an easy way, I feel like, to understand the guardianship and the custodianship of our estates. So think of the relationship between the U.S. government and Aboriginal people as parent-child dynamic. Sovereign nations were defined as if they were children or wards. You will see that in the right from the beginning initial conversations between England and the people here, right? So they were exchanging letters and they would talk in this parent-child sort of way. Also in the Papal Bulls, you will see that. Requiring protection and guidance from a guardian, right? This is how you take guardianship. This is Britney Spears, but apply it to millions and millions of people on the land. This is how they do it. The federal government is the guardian in this case, or the Fed, right? I can't tell you which one is which. The Fed is a corporation, and I really can't say that that's not who the government actually is. Because this is based on the Fed, Jekyll Island. This is based on the Fed taking over the country's monetary policy, but really the estates, right? So I think the Fed is the government, but whatever. This is similar to how a foster parent might assume custodianship over a child's estate, claiming to act in their best interest while taking control over all of the assets. If that makes Any sense at all if any of you guys have been aware of this system? So it's trafficking, just like in the foster care system, how they're trafficking millions of children around all the time, home to home to home, but giving them to different types of traffickers, training them in different ways, be it MK Ultra programs, be it sex trafficking, be it labor. And they are getting paid to do that. They're getting money off of those children's estates because these children are obviously come from a line that's already been assumed into the public trust. This is coming from the church. This is coming from the Bank of England. This is the way they do things, and their custodianship has been coming through these churches, these 501c3 corporations, which are making you members of that corporation. They're receiving money from your state, right? And you're receiving the word that doesn't even match with the ecclesiastical law in the book. If you match what they're telling you at the pulpit to what is in those Bible books, the law books itself, it doesn't even match. You're being told something completely different. And because you're an imbecile, and because you refuse to read, and because you refuse to put one and one together, you are a black, you're a subject, you're a slave, you're a citizen. And it doesn't matter what color you are, by the way, because white is also a status that is owned by this infrastructure. Black is a status owned by the infrastructure. Like, I'm sure people think, oh yeah, if I'm white, it'll be different. But what kind of white are you? Are you a white national? Are you a white foreign national? Are you a white with diplomatic immunity? What kind of white? What kind of white are you? Are you a white citizen? And if you think you're a white sovereign citizen, that is not even a thing. That does not even make sense. You cannot be both sovereign and citizen. So you really have to pay attention to the status that you're placed in. And that has everything to do with your estate. So blacks have the biggest estate. Blacks have been on the planet the longest. Blacks have had the most civilizations. The civilizations thousands and thousands of years before there was any such thing as a white. So the blacks have the earth, right? They have the earth. So if you want to mine lithium in North Carolina, well, I'm from North Carolina. My ancestors are from North Carolina. You would get in touch with me or my trust foundation, right? And you would let me know, hey, we are interested in mining, and then we might be able to work out a deal. But instead, what you do is you consider me an imbecile, a minor, a subject, a slave, a ward of the state, and go, oh no, we don't need to ask her. She's crazy. She's like, she doesn't even know who she is. So don't worry, we'll handle it for her. What was it you wanted to do? Oh, you want to do some mining? Yeah, no problem. Just throw us something, right? And we'll make sure it gets to her. Don't worry. And then it never hits that ledger. That's how they're doing it. It's an accounting issue. I mean, it's a complete moral issue. Don't get me wrong. It's completely morally wrong, but it's really a ledger and accounting issue. So the debt that is being accumulated in the tune of at least $37 trillion actually does go to the Aboriginal people of the land, because that's who you're creating debt from. That's who you're not paying. That's who you owe. So we're going to jump right in, because it is imperative that we have the justification. So the justification behind the doctrine of discovery is really where people should be starting when they're teaching this information, because who authorizes this doctrine of so-called discovery? We've all heard of the doctrine of discovery, and if we haven't, don't worry, we're going to get there. But I think it's interesting that the papacy, the Pope, said that he basically doesn't align with the doctrine of discovery. But in litigation, what we're trying to find out is, do you align with the justification of the doctrine of discovery? You know, because that wasn't the main bull, papal bull, that really kicked everything off. Where did we even get the idea for the doctrine of discovery? Where did that even come from? And that's the colloquial we, because I didn't come up with this shit, and I'm not claiming this shit. And if my family was involved, you need to prove that to me. You need to prove that to me. You need to prove it to me. Okay? Because I haven't received any dividends, no shareholders, no holdings, no nothing. So I'm gonna just say I'm not behind that. Am I showing too much shoulder? Hold on. What is all that? Let's let that shoulder rock. This shoulder up, girl. So here we are, and as you can see, my title here, I was digging for the origination of the white supremacy that I always hear the government talk about. I'm always hearing this white supremacy. White supremacy is everything is founded on white supremacy. That's the problem. So I was looking to see where we started the United States Corporation on white supremacy principles. That's really the question. Was it? And I also is curious about the immigration of all these people onto the land, like, how do we really know what's an illegal immigrant? Like, when does this start? When are we starting this? What's legal and what's illegal? And when is this all starting? Because if there were people already here, then I'm just really not getting how anybody's legal unless we're talking about some sort of fictionary legal sense that is justified on a fictional sort of basis, which the definition of fiction is unreal. So, is there any such thing as a legal? I guess you could be a legal citizen of the corporation of the United States Corporation located in a filing cabinet in Washington, D.C., but can you really be a legal person on this land if you weren't authorized by the people of this land to be here? Let's find out. So that brings us, when you start asking questions like that, justification questions, you're going to find out there's these papal bulls, the DUM Diversas of 1452 and Romanus Pontifex of 1455. Let's just read a little introduction before we get into the meat and potatoes of it. These are papal bulls issued by Pope Nicholas V to the Portuguese monarchy, which sanctioned the conquest of non-Christian lands and the enslavement of non-Christian peoples. These documents are often cited as foundational to the Doctrine of Discovery. Should we make this a little bit bigger? Am I the only one who can't see? Is that good? Let's just bump it up to maybe 125. See if there we go. Okay, so these documents are often cited as foundational to the Doctrine of Discovery. See that? Foundational. So, Inter Caetera of 1493 was issued by Pope Alexander VI, and this papal bull granted Spain the right to conquer newly discovered lands in the Americas which were not already under Christian rule, reinforcing the notion of a divine mandate for European Christian powers. Now, European doesn't necessarily mean white. It does not mean that, especially when we know that the Moors ran Europe from about 700 AD, as they say, to 1492. So in 1452 and 1493, European still doesn't mean white. Neither does Christian. When we find out that the origination of Christianity was in Ethiopian Akkadian space. We're still talking about people with melanin, right? So we must be speaking of color of law when we speak of white supremacy. There is no way we're speaking of the color of skin. And I think that's where a lot of people are getting mixed up. So we're going to go into the DUM Diversas and the Romanus Pontifex, and we're going to go ahead and read them and look for signs of white supremacy and also the historical justification of why and how anybody thought they could even start taking land with people already residing, living, owning, and holding possession of said land. So here we are, the DUM Diversas. Papal Bull Dum Diversas, 18 June 1452. Pope Nicholas V issued the Papal Bull Dum Diversas on said date. It authorized Alfonso V of Portugal to reduce any Saracens, which we are saying now is the translation for Muslims and pagans and any other unbelievers, to perpetual slavery. Let me go check and make sure. So we already have the connotation of perpetual enslavement and in the introduction. Okay, this facilitated the Portuguese slave trade from West Africa. The same Pope wrote the bull Romanus Pontifex on January 5, 1455. So the same pope who is Nicholas, right? Nicholas V has also issued this bull. Now, what I find interesting is we're talking about popes in the Roman Empire issuing bulls pertinent to a king, Alfonso, in Portugal. So they're not far away from each other. So I'm just saying, we're good. We'll see. We'll look at the map here. So here's a little map. I'm going to put it up on the screen so you can see the juxtaposition between the Roman Empire and Portugal. Just get it in your head what we're talking about. And then Africa would be below Spain. Portugal is on Spain. It's within Spain. It's basically blocking the whole edge of Spain that leads to what was called the Ethiopian Ocean, which is now called the Atlantic Ocean. Okay. So he wrote both of those bulls as a follow-up to the DUM Diversas. It extended to the Catholic nations of Europe dominion over discovered lands during the Age of Discovery. That's another note that you need to take so you can look up the Age of Discovery. Because how do you decide that there is only one age of discovery and you are the only discoverer, especially if folks had already discovered or had already been born of the land itself that they were on? Who gives you the right? Along with sanctifying the seizure of non-Christian lands, it encouraged the enslavement of non-native, non-Christian peoples. So I thought we had said that, but we also said Saracens and pagans and any other unbelievers to perpetual slavery. So perpetual slavery, as per these bulls, as you can already see, is justified for Muslims, any pagans, that includes Vikings. This is anybody who was non-Christian. Okay, so they sanctified seizure of non-Christian lands, encouraging the enslavement of native non-Christian people. What if people around the world had never heard of Christianity? There are still people who have never heard of Christianity, and there are missionaries who go to tell them and preach the gospel of Christianity to them to get them to convert to Christianity. And then, as you can clearly see, when they do that conversion, they're also converting themselves and their land and all of their possessions into this same papal bull. Is that okay? There's a tribe they're called the Sentinel tribe, and they actively do not wish to be bothered and be touched by modern society. And people are like, oh, we want to give you medicine. We want to just help you. But if you're coming there on Christian warships, then are you not part of this papal bull strategy to possess them, their souls, and all of their goods, including the land that they're on, in the name of your Lord? Well, let's see. So we start out. We weighing all in singular the premises with due meditation, and noting that since we had formerly by other letters of ours granted among other things, so we need to find the other letters of ours granted among other things, free and ample faculty to the aforesaid King Alfonso to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ, wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his and their use and profit, by having secured the said faculty, the said King Alfonso, or by his authority, the aforesaid Infante, who are his family, basically, non-successing family. So these are not people who are going to become the king, but they're still his family in the right, and they are in all of this claim. justly and lawfully has acquired and possessed and doth possess these islands, lands, harbors, and seas, and they do of right belong and pertain to the said King Alfonso and his successors. In 1493, Alexander VI issued the bull Inter Caetera, stating one Christian nation did not have the right to establish dominion over lands previously dominated by another Christian nation, thus establishing the law of nations. Together, the DUM diversas, the Romanus Pontifex, and the Inter Caetera came to serve as the basis and justification for the doctrine of discovery. And you'll see the doctrine of discovery has no link. This has no link. Okay, but we have links to everything leading up to the doctrine of discovery. So we're not going to jump to the 1493 Inter Caetera because right now we're in 1452, as you can see here. So we are going to go to the 1455 Romanus Pontifex. Okay, we've got a lot of Latin. This is what it looks like. And they would come and roll out the scroll and come on these warships and roll out the scroll and speak this spell into the air in front of people who didn't understand the language, didn't know what was being said over top of them, and make these proclamations, and then mass slaughter until the rest of the colony that was there decided to say, okay, yes, we will be whatever you are talking about. We're going to do it. Fine. Great. Thank you. Leave us alone. Stop. And they're spells. So that's why I did a little cleansing first. I have the candle going because these are spells. These are spells. And you really have to pay attention to that part. You really have to know that this is, words are spells. Words are to be put together in such a succinct manner as to free you from bondage or to explain to someone else what is going on. They are for you to be heard, and these words are dehumanizing. They are oppressive. And I think anybody who is a true Christian should publicly separate themselves from this. Publicly separate yourselves from this ideology, this promise, this spell that you are occupying when you say that you align with that terminology, with that corporation. Because you can be a Christian, but if you're saying that you're down with the psychopathy of world domination and Christendom, and you are okay with this, I don't believe there is any God that's backing this. This is my personal belief. I don't believe so. I don't think so. But if you saw in the first bull, it said they're interested in profit. They're interested in gains. Do you believe that your God is interested in taking and enslaving others for gains, for personal? Do you believe that? Those are the kinds of oaths and the kinds of pledges, because you are supposed to know about all of this. You cannot, ignorance of the law is no excuse to the law. You cannot say, oh, I didn't know. No, you knew, and you were okay with it. You didn't publicly say anything. And so you are a part of, at that point, what is called that colonizer. I mean, this is worse than just colonizing. You know what I mean? Colonizing is like, you could still get permission, but if somebody wants you there, that's one thing. But this is worse. This is spells. This is wordsmithing. This is legalese. This is legal fiction. This is still running today. This is what all the cases are built on today. This is your premise for even taking over lands that are not yours. This is your justification. So, the Bull Romanus Pontifex. All right, Savage Souls, thank you so much for tuning in to part 1 of the Papal Bull class. If you made it all the way through, you are a champion, and it's obvious that you are one of the good ones who is interested in getting to the bottom of how we got into this situation. And yes, there was a lot to this. And no, I did not want to spend this much time teaching a Papal Bull class. It's just now I see why I couldn't find this type of course, because it takes you so many places that it is a seminar. It's like a semester just to teach something like this. So now I get it. I took on something that was bigger than I first imagined. I was like, oh, I'm just going to read the Papal Bulls. But then they really do make you think. So today we made it through the DUM DIVERSAS. We will get to the Romanus Pontifex, and we will make our way to the Intercatera, and we will wrap everything up with the Doctrine of Discovery. And in that, of course, we're going to be moving through time and learning about the law and the structure of the legal fiction that many, if not almost everyone, is currently entrapped in some way, shape, or form, mostly without being aware. But also you get to see and learn about the people around us in these official oathed positions who do know all this information. The Masonic right entities know all this information. That there are people at the top of the churches that do know this information. So along with learning about this, you learn about the people in your world, and you really get to see that some people are living and loving this setup because they are part of the very chosen few elitist folk who are macking off of this setup, while the entire world, and it's like 8 billion people on the planet, and they want all of them. They want all of them. I mean, what kind of personality does that take? There's a certain point where you have enough. And now we see that those who have this information are not the kind to even stop themselves when they know they are party to a fraud. They have literally aligned themselves outside of the regions of anything that could be considered godly, of anything that could be considered of source. And they are playing their hand, hoping that Satan has a better deal, because thus far they've been eating good. So it really is a test of spirituality. It really is a war of spirituality. It really is a war of the soul and your morality, your eternal edicts. What do you truly align with? What vibration and frequency are you on? Are you on truth for real? Or are you the type to say you're on truth and then you like to kind of shuck and jive with the lie if the lie is actually giving you kickbacks? And are you utilizing some of these clauses, like the at will clause, for instance, seeing people making these tacit agreements, or seeing people call themselves slaves every day because they don't know what words and verbiage they're using. And so letting that happen and not trying to correct them because it's at will. They're putting themselves in bondage. They're not doing anything about it. Acquiescence means silence. Silence means consent. If you are making up those kinds of excuses within yourself, I would say that you should take this time to search your heart and find out what you truly believe in, and see where it is you plan on going with that soul of yours, because Cosmic Court is real. So is Cosmic Justice. I am on the Cosmic Justice team. I am witnessing everything that I note is going as confirmation in the Akashic. I am reporting at the soul level. I will see you in the hereafter, and there shall be no excuses for those who are aware of what's going on. Know that your days are numbered at the soul level. So do the right thing. Savage souls, go Savage Girls, Goddess Gang team. I'm out.